So we will do our weekly get-together, talk about the Pasha of the week, and hopefully we can draw from it some parallel for ourselves, some understanding of our own process and activity over here. We have now, as you all know, transferred to a new Chumash. We finished Vayikra. Now we are in a new Chumash called Bamidbar. In simple terms, Breishis speaks about the beginning of the world, the creation, the always, the fathers of the world. Shmoi speaks about the Geulas Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, which is that moment when the Jewish people became a people, with an identity, with a Torah. Chumash Vayikra is a Chumash closely related to the Mishkan, because in the Chumash Shmois, to complete the Jewish people, we not only receive the Torah, we also build the Mishkan. Chumash Vayikra is just all the dinim, the laws that are related to the Mishkan. It's called Toras Kohanim. Chumash Vayikra is also known as Toras Kohanim, the Torah for the Kohanim, because most of the mitzvahs, the halachas, or the dinim of Chumash Vayikra pertain to the Kohanim. Now that we are a complete people, and we know we have a Mishkan, we have a Torah, now we're starting on our journey towards Eretz Yisrael. And that is the Chumash Bamidbar. Chumash Bamidbar essentially speaks about the journey in the Midbar, in the desert.
Why do they discuss traveling to Israel? I mean, why do they discuss building the Mishkan before going to Israel?
Because before going to Israel, they had to become a full-fledged people. And they became full-fledged people when they got a Torah and they had a Mishkan. So now we are traveling in the Midbar. And the first thing that Hashem tells Moshe that we should do as part of this journey, of this travel, is to count the Yidden. That's what you learned, I'm sure. As a matter of fact, in Chumash Bamidbar, detailed counting of Eden are related twice. Once in the beginning, in the Chumash, in the Seder Bamidbar, and once towards the end in Pashas Pinchas, which was almost at the end, was very close to the end of this journey. And the counting, even though there are many occurrences and even mitzvahs that the Torah describes in Chumash Bamidbar, occurrences, happenings. But, and yet, the counting is somehow, for some reason, considered the central theme, like a main inyan in the Chumash, to the extent that this Chumash is also called Chumash Hapkudim, the Chumash of the counting. Just like Chumash Breishis, Shmois, and Vayikra have alternate names which describe their content, Chumash Bamidbar also has an alternate name, and that is the counting, the Chumash of the counting. Obviously, counting is of great significance, and then particularly in the situation of being a traveler, of moving through the desert and moving towards Eretz Yisrael. We want to examine a little bit and talk about the counting, and then, of course, in Mitzvah Shem, you will find the parallel how it pertains to us. In examining the way the counting was taking place, the count, as the Torah describes, was done on every individual. B'mispar shemos. B'mispar shemos means by count of names. Every individual was identified as an individual by name, which points to the importance and significance of the individual. This significance of the individual is also obvious from the fact that even though we are counting a whole nation, and amongst the Yidden there were very varied, different levels of people. You can imagine. In the whole nation there were the great scholars, and besides Moshe and Aaron, there were the Sanhedrin, there were those who are of the highest intellectual and Hasidic caliber, and those who were simple people. There were simple people who Yidden all the time. And yet, when it came to this counting, each one occupies the same amount of space. Each one was one. No difference. So we see, as I said before, the significance and importance of the individual. On the other hand, the counting also related the individual to his shevet, to his tribe. We see that in this counting is different than the counting that took place way before. You must have learned, recognized that before the Mishkan was built. This counting was after the Mishkan was built. They were ready to travel. This was in Iyar, beginning of Iyar. The Mishkan was put up in the beginning of Nisan. How do I know it's the beginning of Iyar? Because it says so in the Torah. Ve'echad la'chodesh hasheni. Chodesh hasheni is Iyar. Rish Chodesh Iyar was the mitzvah given to Moshe to count the Yid. But before that, the Yidden were counted before making the Mishkan, because this counting, the shkolim, this is what was used actually as part of the building of the Mishkan. The silver coins from the shkolim were melted down into the basis for the boards of the Mishkan. There was another counting, but there is a big difference in the way the counting was performed in the first time and this time. The first time, there was no distinction between the Shvatim. It was one counting for the entire people. And there's no mention that they were counted by name. Every Yid gave a half a shekel, the shkolim were counted, and we know what they have. In this counting, there was an emphasis on the individual, and there was an emphasis on the Shvatim, on the subdivision of the tribes of the Shvatim, and the count itself was done not only by Moshe and Aaron, but also by the participation of the Nesim, of the heads of the tribes. Every Shevet was represented by his Nasi.
And the first counting was also Ben Esrim Umayla, or was...
Sorry?
In the first counting, it was only 20 years and up as well, right?
20 years and up, yes. Always the same thing.
And the Levim were counted at all in the first counting?
The Levim, it doesn't say, and I don't know the answer. I have to think. Maybe I do know, but I can't think of the moment. Probably not, because it says that the counting was to wipe away the sin of the Egel, and the Levim were not involved in the Egel. One of these two aspects, first of all, counting the individual, his relationship to the Shevet and the whole people. Counting, there's halacha relating to counting, to minyan. The halacha is that something that's counted, dover shebeminyan, something that has the property, that has the value, the significance of being counted, cannot be botel, cannot lose its value even if it becomes mixed up with a big number of units. Dover shebeminyan is called einoi botel. You know the halacha of bitul, that if a drop of milk falls into a pot of meat, so if the amount of meat or the amount of that's in the pot is 60 times as much as the size of this droplet, so the droplet is null, and you're allowed to eat it, even though it's milk and meat, which is forbidden. But the milk loses its value, and it's no longer, it's considered like it doesn't exist. This is true when it gets mixed in, and even if it doesn't mix in, if there is a majority of units, and you don't know which one is what, if you know the majority is kosher, then it's kosher. But that applies only to such entities that can become bottled, that can be considered null. But something that cannot be considered null is not bottled. Like for instance, you know the din of a b'choyer. A b'choyer, an animal that's a b'choyer, a sheep, or a goat, or a calf, that's a b'choyer. That b'choyer has to be brought into the mikdash. Like a korban belongs to the kohen altogether. It has a kedusha, and if it is outside of the Yerushalayim, outside of the Mishkan, you're not allowed to eat it. And it's oiled, not a kohen is allowed to eat it. You have to first bring a korban. What if one b'choyer gets mixed in with 1,000 behemoths that are not b'choyer? Then you're at the creek, because the b'choyer cannot become bottled. Huh? Oh, up the creek. I know, right? That's an expression. It means that you cannot use all the 1,000. You have to bring them all into the Mishkan.
And you can't sell them and get your money back because you can't redeem a b'chor, right?
That's right. Unless it becomes a mum or whatever it is.
But you can't mum, you can't do it on, you can't make it mum on purpose.
No, not right. This is called davar shebeminyan ein bottle. Something that has the quality that you count it, that means that it has such what's called cheshivus, such a respect that it cannot be considered null. Therefore, when Hashem said count every yid, that counting reveals in the Yid, in every individual Yid, such a supreme quality. Even though every Yid to himself, every one of us to himself, are prepared to say, who am I, what am I, I'm nothing. But the Rebbe disagrees with that. Hashem says that we are of tremendous, tremendous value because you're all countable. Everyone has a value to the extent that it can be counted individually and cannot be discounted. Discounted means lose his value as a countable thing. This is the first union of counting. This counting is absolutely necessary to tell a people who are walking through a desert, who are journeying through a desert, they don't have their home, they don't have their land, they are a non-entity. Not a real presence, right? You're nowhere. You're nowhere. A homeless nation. So Hashem tells Moshe, you count every individual Yid so that they will reveal and establish, and that the Yid themselves will know that wherever the Yid is, he may be homeless, he may be traveling to the desert, he is never a lost entity. He is known to the Meibashim by name, as an individual. In addition to that, as being as an individual, we also make a point to say that as a result of the count of a given number of individuals, we have a whole shevet, we have a tribe. Which means, again, this tribe consists, as we said before, consists of many, many people. They are in Shevet Yehuda, for instance, there was Nachshon and Aminodab. Everybody heard of Nachshon and Aminodab. Nachshon ben Aminodab built the Mishkan. He was a very big Baal Meyuchas. He was a man of great stature. And he was the Nasi of Shevet Yehuda. And also, in the same Shevet, there were people, it was a huge Shevet of 70 some odd 1,000 people. There were people of a much lesser caliber than us. And they were all contributing to being to their Shevet equally. Which is a tremendous revelation. And each one of us have to reflect and understand this. That in addition to being an individual, and he's being counted and being considered of tremendous value, he also complements means completes, he makes up the shape. He makes one whole entity of this Shevet. And all this rotten together make up the entity of the Jewish people. And that entity that is built from the individuals needs each one individual to complete it, to make it a whole thing. This is comparable to a human being, a simple person. Every individual person has 613 parts, organs. Amongst these is the brain, the heart, the eyes. You can go down, so to speak, on lower and lower degree of importance. The brain and the heart, these are primary organs. Without these organs, there is no human being. The eyes are of tremendous import for development of the person, for life. The toe, the little toe, has very little significance functionally. Functionally means for the purpose of doing anything. A person can act and do everything perfectly if his little toe is a little distorted, disfigured. I'm not talking about missing it. A little disfigured. Right? Doesn't hurt. And yet, what constitutes a complete person? When all of his limbs are whole. And if one of his limbs, even the least significant of them, is distorted, he is called a Baal Mum. Baal Mum means he is a damaged person. And the Baal Mum, for all practical purposes, he can do everything he can do. But let's say a Kohen, a Baal Mum, no matter how insignificant the Mum is internally and functionally, he's a Baal Mum. He can't enter the B'Shem, he can't do Karbanos because he's not perfect. Baal Mum. Mum means a damage. Okay? Baal Mum, one who has a damage. So that Yid has to reflect and recognize that while besides his own mission in life, that every person has a mission in life, every person is counted, every Yid is counted by Hashem directly, by name. In addition to that, he also makes complete the Jewish people. And as it says, that by Matan Torah, when Hashem gave us the Torah, there was a certain number of 600,000 basically. So it says that if this number, 600,000, were missing one, then Matan Torah couldn't happen. It needed the entire complete Jewish people as a complete entity, exactly every individual that was there. One would be missing, it couldn't be Matan Torah. Because Torah was given to the people as a whole, and the people, and to be a whole people, you needed every individual, regardless of his stature. We see even beyond that. Moshe Rabbeinu, at the time when the Egel was made, was on top of the mountain. He was receiving the Torah, was receiving the luchos from Hashem's hand. That was Moshe doing at that time. He was completely beyond and above the whole parade that happened over there with the Egel. The whole slide down and fall. The people involved in the Egel was a significant number, but relative to the entire people, it was a small number. It was like 0.5%.
Not everybody went there?
Not everybody made the Egel. No.
You said it's only Shevet Levi that wasn't...
No, Shevet Levi was the whole Shevet. No one from that Shevet was involved. Other Shvotim could not claim that they are not involved at all. But there were 3,000 people that were executed because they were witnesses that they served the Egel, and there was also some more that there were no witnesses, the plague. But it was relatively, it was a small portion. It wasn't all the people.
What's the mile of Aaron trying to subvert their plan if it was such a small percentage?
Wanted to save the people.
I'm asking if it fits in with what you're saying.
Well, let me finish the thought, and you will see what the Mila is. So relatively, it was a small. It was definitely a transgression. It was a painful thing, but it didn't involve the whole people. Moshe Rabbeinu was receiving the Torah for the whole people, and he was receiving the first luchas. This is the first luchas were even holier than the second luchas. The first luchas, the second luchas were made. The material was actually brought up by Moshe from a quarry in a mountain, and Hashem wrote, inscribed on the stones the Seres Adimus. The first luchas, the luchas themselves, the material, the stone was given milmaila from above. It was a stone created in Gan Eden. It was a completely different type of stone. This is what was given to Moshe in Har Sinai. At the time when Eden sinned with the Egel, it says in the Torah that Hashem said to Moshe, while Moshe was still on the mountain, Hashem said to Moshe, Lech Reid, go and descend. Come down, Reid, descend. So Rashi says over there, what is the implication of the word descend? Descend means step down from your madrega. You're losing your great revelation. You're losing your great status now. I'm taking it away from you. Why? Because your nation has sinned. You have all the greatness that I'm giving you, b'shvil Yisrael, for the sake of Yisrael. And if Yisrael have sinned, then you also lose. And who sinned? It was, as I said, a relatively small portion. And above that, beside that was a small portion, the instigators of the whole thing were the Erev Rav, were not even Jewish, original Jewish, Muyachosim. It was the mix that came along with them from Mitzrayim. They were the instigators. And yet, not only the people suffered, Moshe, who was completely above the whole thing, he suffered. The head, Moshe, he also lost his madrega because of the fact that some people on the lowest ebb had gone a step further, a step lower. Which attests to the fact that the Jewish people are one entity. And every individual Eid complements, makes complete the whole people. And the more complete he is, the healthier the Eid is. Like we said before, the more beautiful the toenail is, the more complete the whole human being is. Even though it's insignificant, relatively speaking, functional or any other way. This teaching, this implication, was told Eden at the time, as I said, and Eden are now ready to travel through the desert. And I explained briefly before, because traveling through the desert meant, implied to the Eden, like I said, and as you learn and you travel and you learn right in the Pasha, the next Pasha, the Pasha after, in Pasha Ba'aleischo, when the real journey begins, you will see that as soon as they even travel a certain distance, they right away complain and says, "Where are we going? What's going on?" There's no water. There's no food. We are no place. We are homeless. A homeless people. They right away felt it right in the first journey away from Har Sinai, from Har Cherev.
Individuals felt this also?
We're talking about the individual's complaint. The Eden, the individual's complaint. The complainers, you should know always. The complainers were always a minority amongst Eden. But the minority in the Yiddish, in the Jewish people is significant. Very significant. In order to encourage and give the Eden the perspective, the understanding of who they are and how they're going to conquer this journey in the desert, there was this counting which gave the Eden the status, as I said, on an individual basis, that they are Dovasha B'minyan, every individual, regardless of what his status is. And every individual must also remember that he's also part of the Shevet. And he's also part of the whole Jewish people. And the whole people, the whole Shevet depends on him. What he does affects entire people. What the whole people is, that keeps him up. Just like in a human being. The human being is complete if every limb of his is complete. And he is healthy if his head is healthy. It's all intertwined. The highest in the human being comes from the head and from the heart. And everybody is connected that way to the source. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the Jewish people are one people. And every individual gets his chayus, his godly chayus, from the head, from the Rosh B'nai Yisrael. You've learned it, I'm sure you know it by heart. Rosh B'nai Yisrael, Shebedoirei, the heads of the tribes of B'nai Yisrael, Shebedoirei of his generation. Just like the head in an individual person is the first recipient of the Chayus HaNefesh. The Neshama first rests in the brain. This is the first part, the first touch down, so to speak, of the Neshama in the goof. And from there, it disseminates, the Chayus disseminates throughout the body. The same is true about the entire Jewish people. And everyone is interrelated. In reflecting on this phenomenon, or this parsha, and going over several sikhs of the Rebbe, it came to me, with great clarity, the position that Dochim in Yeshiva are in. Especially Dochim here in Seagate. Because when you talk about little children in Olei Torah, number one, they're little children, they don't have much responsibility. And they have homes that take care of them. They are not in the desert. They are at home. They go to yeshiva, they learn, and they come home. Here we're talking about adult men who, by all right, are anxious to get to the land. They can be in the desert. They have to. They're considering, when am I going to settle down? When am I going to get home? Get a home? How long am I going to be homeless? His home, right?
Well, this is home, no?
I'm sorry?
This is home.
This is home. But you don't want to make this home for too long.
Rabbi Abba said that our home is just an extension of here.
That's right. But you want to get to the extension.
Okay.
Enjoy it while you're here, I have a home.
Huh?
I said, enjoy it while you're here, I have a home.
That's right. No, everybody understands what I mean. Baruch Hashem, the yeshiva is a home. The yeshiva does care. There's no question about it. But we're talking about when the person thinks, like even when in the Bamidbar, they had the heavenly clouds and they had the Mishkan, and they had their tents, and they had their food, they had Moshe Rabbeinu. They were also taken care of. There was no more cozy place in the world than when Eden were in the desert. And they were covered up with the Anane HaKovet. The food was brought down from heaven in front of their tents. Their clothing, their garments were always new. They went to sleep, they got up in the morning, the garments were newly ironed, cleaned.
It sounds just like Seagate.
Excuse me?
It sounds just like Seagate.
and grown to their size. They never outgrew their garments. They were the most cozy situation. And yet they were in a constant journey. Because that is not ultimately what Hashem had wants for the Jewish people. The counting of the Yidden was for the purpose of, they're called Tzivos Hashem, Koil Yoytze Tzova. What does Yoytze Tzova mean?
Because of the war to the army.
Anyone who can step forward and face the world and conquer the world. That's Yoytze Tzova. It's not a question of sitting there in the desert. It's Tzova. You have the Eden, from the time that they were taken out of Mitzrayim, they had a function, a task. They're Tzivos Hashem. They're supposed to conquer the world for Torah, for Yiddishkeit, for Hashem. And this is the state in which we all are in now. Everyone here, in every yeshiva bocher knows that his task is not to sit in yeshiva indefinitely. His task is to acquire all the tools and the arsenals and the perspective and the strength of mind and heart to go and conquer the world. In order to be able to face, first of all, to be able to accept this transitory state without it getting lost, and recognize that everyone individually is of extreme importance. One cannot measure what he accomplishes here, and what he absorbs, what he learns. He cannot measure it by any external yardstick, comparison. There is no external yardstick. It's not a question of comparing who, I didn't do as well as somebody else. It's totally insignificant. Every individual has his importance, his significance. Because ultimately, every individual is Dover Shebeminyan. He has this power of that. He's a counted entity, and he gives support to the entire Jewish people, and he gives support, and he will go and conquer his place in the world, regardless of other qualities, of his intellectual abilities and so forth. Everybody has his intellectual abilities, but that's not what it's measured by. What it's measured by is what type of person he is, what depth that he has, what type of individual is he. Is he an individual that can be counted, which means he doesn't get lost, he doesn't lose himself, he can face, so to speak, an enemy and face him down, and not be mispoiled, not be affected, because he knows that he was counted by Hashem. He was given that power of resistance, of power, and he can conquer, he can go through any obstacles. That's the counting. And this is essentially what we are trying to absorb here in the yeshiva. We are learning, and some people are more successful, some people are less successful in terms of quantity of learning. And we can remember that we can now. But everyone will be successful in identifying himself who he is. And who is he? He is two things. He is an individual and he is a member of the Jewish people. And everything that he does, and every situation that he faces, he will remember both of these principles. One time by Fabrengen, the Rebbe said the following. A Yid lives wherever in a neighborhood, and he has non-Jewish neighbors. And he looks around their behavior and his behavior. And he sees that he has many more restrictions. We're not talking about the Yeshiva Bochum. We're talking about Eden who are challenged by this. Why should I be different? They're challenged by this. The guy, he can go and enjoy himself. Shabbos by him is no restriction. He has a day off and I have a day off. He has a day off and he goes and does his own thing, and I'm restricted. I go to shul and I go to sleep. I can't do anything on my day off. The same thing goes for many other aspects of life. So he asks himself, I may bring it down, of course it doesn't belong here, just give you the point. You know, he's kind of, I'm losing out. So the Rebbe said the following, he says, all he has to do is reflect who are the ancestors of the Goy and who are his ancestors. Ancestors, fathers, parentage. And here's what the Rebbe said. At the time when yours, meaning the Jews, the Jewish grandfather, our grandfather, Abraham, was going around the world teaching the world about one God, the neighbor's grandfather, the Rebbe said this, was eating raw human flesh.
Is it cannibalism?
Well, in those years. How do you compare? You have a completely different structure, construct. We can't compare. There's no yardstick that we can compare ourselves to. We have to know that we are, Hashem declared us as countable entities. We don't get lost. The fact that we don't get lost has been proven over and over and over again throughout human history. Every individual, and this is what happened in desert, this is what happens to us. Every individual has to reflect of who he is and not measure himself against an external yardstick. Has to remember what kind of koiches he has, what he's trying to absorb here in yeshiva. Effectively, he wants to get clearly in his mind and heart the strength that he has given us in the individual and his overall connection and responsibility and source of strength from being a member of the Jewish people. And how he, in his simple life, is a contributor to the health of the entire people. This will give him enormous encouragement. You sit and learn, and I learn again. I don't see any progress. I learned this yesterday, tomorrow I learned the next part. What do I accomplish? You can't measure what you accomplish. You'll measure what you accomplish after you go out to the yeshiva and you face the world. You'll see what you accomplished. You'll see that you have a depth that the world doesn't even know about. You have an understanding of life You have an understanding of human beings. You have an understanding of good and bad, of good and of truth, that the world is completely oblivious to. Not only oblivious, they have it distorted and completely upside down. And it is going to be your job to straighten it out and to bring light and clarity. And you'll be able to do it. Because you will not get confused with that. You will not get confused. Because you know this truth at a much deeper level. Because you were in yeshiva a year, 2 or 3, whatever it that you can absorb, so to speak, in your mind and heart, in the blood. This is effectively the hope of every yeshiva bahar that comes in yeshiva and stays whatever amount of time that he's able to stay. That he should come out with a different perspective, personal perspective. Not that he knows the truth, but he becomes part of the truth. He sees the world from a different perspective. And he is indestructible. And then, with all our combined effort throughout the Jewish world, we will all cover the less distance that remains in the desert, and will come to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach. We're no more flimsy people. We're real people. You know what I'm saying? We have the patience for everything. As long as something that's meaningful is absorbed, we have the patience. We don't have to run any place. We're in the desert. Where are we running? Just want to absorb deeper and deeper what we have here. So I wish all of us lots of success in eating the man. The food that you eat in yeshiva is comparable to man. And the water that you drink in yeshiva is comparable to the Me'ero Shel Miriam. And the roof that you have in yeshiva is comparable to the Anane HaKovet. That's where you are. Now just sit there and absorb the holiness and the greatness. Lots of success.